Chapter 1. The Glass Tower. My name is Thomas Miller. I am 56 years old. I own 34 companies, 3 private jets, and a penthouse in Chicago that touches the clouds. From my window on the 60th floor, the cars below look like ants. The people look like dust. For 30 years, that was my goal, to be so high up that I couldn't see the small things, to be so rich that I didn't need anyone. I won. I am at the top. But tonight, the silence in this room is louder than a jet engine. I am sitting at a mahogany desk that costs more than a family home. I am drinking a glass of scotch, 30 years old, smoky and cold. I listen to the sound of my own breathing. Tick, tock, tick, tock. No, that's not a clock. My penthouse has no clocks. I hate the sound of ticking. It reminds me that I am losing the only thing I cannot buy. Time. The tick is the sound of my expensive leather shoes on the marble floor. Click, click, click. I walk to the window. The glass is cold against my forehead. Outside, Chicago is a sea of lights, but I am in a dark cage made of gold. My phone vibrates on the desk. Visit. It is my assistant, Marcus. Mr. Miller, the Tokyo merger is ready. You need to sign the papers. It's a $600 million deal. $600 million. 10 years ago, I would have danced. Tonight, it feels like more dust. Leave it on the desk, Marcus, I say. My voice sounds like sandpaper. I haven't spoken to a real person in 2 days. I walk to the trash, can near the door. Marcus is a good assistant. He cleans everything. But he missed something. A small, crumpled piece of paper was stuck to the side of the bin. I pick it up. My hands that sign billion-dollar contracts, start to shake. It is a wedding invitation. The paper is heavy. It smells like vanilla and expensive ink. The wedding of Sarah Miller and David Evans. Saturday, October 12th, Sarah. My daughter. My only child. I haven't seen her in 5 years. The last time we spoke, she told me, "Dad, you don't have a heart. You have a calculator where your heart should be." I didn't get an invitation in the mail. This was the save-the-date card I told Marcus to throw away months ago. I thought I didn't care. I thought I was too busy. But then I see the location. Oak Creek Garden. My heart stops. Oak Creek. That is where my father used to take me to fish. That is where I promised Sarah I would build her a swing set 30 years ago. I never built that swing set. I was too busy building towers. I look at my reflection in the dark window. I see a man in a $5,000 suit. I see a man with a private jet. But in the reflection, I also see a crasher. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I am a stranger to my own blood. I look at my hands. They are clean. Too clean. They have never worked. They have only taken. I finish my scotch in one gulp. The ice clinks against the glass. Clink. I have 3 days. I have billions of dollars. But as I stand in my glass tower, I realize the most terrifying truth of my life. I am the richest man in the world, and I have absolutely nothing to give her. Thomas realizes that a check for $1 million will only make Sarah hate him more. He needs a gift that money cannot buy. He remembers the basement of his childhood home, and a certain wooden box he hasn't opened since 1994. Chapter 2. The Cream-Colored Card. I look at the invitation again. The cream-colored paper feels heavy in my hand. It is not just paper. It is a wall I built, brick by brick, over 25 years of being busy. I walk to my garage. In the elevator, the lights are bright and white. My heart is beating fast. I get into my silver Italian sports car. It smells like new leather and power. I drive away from the glass towers, away from the noise of the city, and toward the place I promised I would never go back to. My childhood home is small. It sits at the end of a quiet street, in a town that time forgot. The paint is peeling. The garden is full of tall grass. I haven't been here since my father's funeral in 1994. The air here smells different. It smells like wet earth and old wood. It smells like memories I tried to kill with money. I walk to the back of the house. There's a small shed. My father called it the heart of the house. It was his workshop. He was a clockmaker. He didn't make much money, but he knew exactly what second it was. He always had time for a story. He always had time for me. The door to the shed is stuck. I push it with my shoulder. Krieg. The sound is like a ghost screaming. Inside, the air is thick with dust. It dances in the light of my flashlight. I see old tools, hammers, saws, small, delicate tweezers. And there, in the corner, covered by a gray cloth, is a giant. I pull the cloth away. Dust fills my lungs. Cough. Cough. It is a grandfather clock. 6 feet of dark oak wood. It is beautiful, but it is broken. The glass is cracked. The golden pendulum is still. It hasn't moved for 30 years. I remember this clock. My father started building it when Sarah was born. He wanted to give it to her on her wedding day. A clock is a heart, Thomas. He used to say, it tells you that every moment is a gift. Don't waste them. But he died before he could finish the internal gears. And I was too busy buying a second home in Aspen to care about a wooden box. I touch the wood. It is cold. I look at my hands. These are the hands of a CEO. I don't know how to fix a clock. I don't even know how to use a screwdriver anymore. I am a man who pays people to fix things. I take out my phone. I want to call the best clock restorer in London. I want to pay them $50,000 to fly here and fix it tonight. I want to buy the solution. But then I look at the invitation. The wedding of Sarah Miller. If I pay someone to fix this, it is just another check. It is just more billionaire Thomas. It isn't a father. I look at the clock. I look at the tiny, rusted gears on the workbench. They are so small, so fragile, like a relationship. I take off my $5,000 suit jacket. I throw it onto a dusty chair. I roll up my white silk sleeves. I pick up a small brush. My phone vibrates in my pocket. Bzzz. Another deal. Another $1 million. I look at the phone. Then I look at the clock. I take the phone, and I turn it off. The silence that follows is terrifying. It is just me, the dust, and the dead clock. I have 72 hours until the wedding. I have no idea what I am doing. My hands are shaking. But for the first time in 30 years, I am not looking at a screen. I am looking at the time I lost. Chapter 3, Blood and Cedar. I looked at Marcus. He stood in the doorway of the dusty shed like a ghost from another planet. His black suit was perfect. His hair was perfect. He looked at my grease-covered hands and my ruined silk shirt with pure shock. Sir, Marcus said, stepping over a pile of sawdust. The board is calling an emergency meeting. The investors heard you turned off your phone. The stock price is dropping. They think you've been kidnapped. Or worse. I looked down at the tiny, broken pin in my hand. I looked at the blood on my cuff. For 30 years, a dropping stock price was my greatest fear. Today, it felt like someone telling me it might rain in a city I don't live in. I'm not kidnapped, Marcus, I said. My voice was low. I'm busy. Busy doing what? He asked, looking at the broken clock. Sir, this is a piece of junk. If you want a clock, I can call Sotheby's. We can buy a museum piece by tonight. But you need to get in the car. Now, I picked up a piece of sandpaper. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound was small, but in the quiet shed, it felt more important than Marcus's voice. I don't want a clock that someone else made, I said. I want to fix this one. Marcus didn't understand. He couldn't. He saw a billionaire sitting in the dirt. I saw a man trying to find his soul. Leave Marcus, I said. Tell them I'm sick. Tell them I'm dead. I don't care. After he left, the silence returned, but it was heavier. I tried to go back to the gears. I tried to be delicate, but my body was fighting me. My fingers felt like thick sausages. My back felt like it was being poked with hot needles. I tried to force a small wheel into place. Snap! Another piece of metal broke. I roared in frustration and threw the pliers against the wall. Clang! I sat back on the hard floor and put my head in my hands. The smell of old cedar and oil filled my nose. I started to cry. I wasn't crying because the clock was broken. I was crying because I realized that for 25 years, I had forgotten how to try. I had forgotten how to fail. I had used money to skip the struggle of life. If something was hard, I bought a solution. If a person was difficult, I fired them. Now, I was facing a problem that didn't care about my bank account. I looked at my hands again. They were shaking. They were bleeding. They were ugly. But then I saw it. Under the workbench, in the shadows, was my father's old manual. It was a handwritten book of notes. I pulled it out. The pages were yellow and smelled like old paper and tobacco. I opened to a random page. In his messy handwriting, my father had written, "The clock doesn't work because you want it to. It works because you listen to it. If you force the metal will break. You must wait for the rhythm." I closed my eyes and breathed in the dust. I stopped trying to beat the clock like a business rival. I picked up a new pen. I didn't rush. I waited. I felt the tension in the spring. Slowly, very slowly, I slid the pen into the hole. It clicked. Click. It was a tiny sound, but to me, it was louder than a stadium of people cheering my name. I stayed there until the moon was high in the sky. My suit jacket was a rag. My hands were a mess. But the first gear was in place. I was no longer a CEO. I was a student, and the devil hadn't finished with me yet. I knew Marcus would be back, and next time he would bring a much bigger temptation. Chapter 4, The $1 Million Poison. The second day began with a cold rain. The sound of water hitting the tin roof of the shed was like thousands of tiny fingers tapping, asking me to come back to reality. Tap, tap, tap. I was exhausted. My eyes were red, and my muscles felt like they were filled with lead. I was sleeping on a pile of old blankets on the workshop floor. I didn't want to leave. I felt that if I stepped back into the world of mirrors and marble, I would never come back. At 10 a.m., the silence was shattered. VRR, VRR, VRR. I had turned off my phone, but I forgot the emergency satellite phone in my briefcase. It was a black, heavy device meant for disasters. Only one person had the code. Julian, my business partner for 30 years. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't stop. It was a persistent, aggressive sound that cut through the smell of cedar and oil. I picked it up. Thomas. Thank God. Julian's voice screamed through the speaker. He sounded like he was on a battlefield. Where are you? The Tokyo deal is falling apart. But forget Tokyo. Something bigger just happened. I looked at the golden pendulum of the clock. I was cleaning the rust off it with a soft cloth. I'm busy, Julian. Listen to me. Julian shouted. The Henderson Group just made an offer. They want to buy our entire logistics division. Cash. Today. Thomas, your share of the profit is $120 million. $120 million. My hand stopped moving. In the world of business, that number is a sun. It burns everything else away. With that money, I could buy 10 more houses. I could buy a fleet of planes. I could buy anything. They have one condition, Julian continued, his breath heavy in my ear. The contract must be signed in person at their headquarters in New York by 4 p.m. today. If you aren't there, the deal is dead. I have a jet waiting for you at the local airstrip. It's a 20-minute drive from where you are. I looked at my hands. They were covered in grease. I looked at the clock. It was still silent. It was still broken. I looked at the invitation to Sarah's wedding. It was sitting on the workbench, stained with a drop of my blood. The devil was offering me a way out. I could take the money, fly to New York, and be a hero again. I could tell myself that I was doing it for Sarah, that I would give her $10 million as a wedding gift. It would be so easy. I wouldn't have to struggle with these tiny gears. I wouldn't have to face her anger. I could just be the rich father again. Thomas, are you there? The car is 5 minutes away. Get your suit on. This is the biggest win of our lives. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I reached for my suit jacket, but then I smelled it, the scent of old tobacco and cedar. It was the smell of my father. I remembered the day he died. He didn't have $1 in his pocket, but he held my hand and said, I'm not leaving you money, Tommy. I'm leaving you my time. Use it well. I looked at the satellite phone. It felt heavy and cold, like a piece of ice. Julian, I said. My voice was steady. I'm not coming. What? Are you crazy? It's 120 million. The price is too high, I said. What are you talking about? They are paying us. No, I whispered. I've been paying for 30 years. I'm tired of buying things. I'm trying to build something. I didn't wait for him to answer. I walked to the back of the shed and dropped the satellite phone into a bucket of dirty water used for cleaning wood. Plop! A few bubbles rose to the surface, and then the light on the phone went dark. The silence returned. I walked back to the workbench. I felt lighter, but I also felt a deep, terrifying cold. I had just thrown away a fortune. I had burned the bridge back to my old life. There was no safety net now. I had to fix this clock, because if I didn't, I would be a man with no money, no career, and no daughter. I picked up a tiny screwdriver. My hand didn't shake this time, but as I reached the mainspring, I felt a sharp, crushing weight in my chest. It wasn't greed this time. It was a physical hand, squeezing my heart. The air in the room suddenly turned into fire. The price of my change was about to be much higher than I ever imagined. Chapter 5. The Weight of a Broken Heart. The pain was not like a lightning bolt. It was like an ocean, a cold, heavy tide of gray pressure rising from my stomach to my throat. I tried to breathe, but the air in the shed felt thick, like I was inhaling sawdust. My vision began to blur. The golden gears on the workbench started to dance and spin. I reached out to grab the edge of the table, but my hand, the hand that had just rejected $100 million, felt like it belonged to a stranger. Thud. My knees hit the wooden floor. The sound was dull and lonely. I tried to call out, but my voice was gone. All I could hear was a frantic, irregular drumming of my own heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was a broken rhythm. It was a clock with a snapped spring. I fell onto my side. My face was pressed against the cold, dirty floorboards. From this angle, I could see under the workbench. I saw a lost marble from my childhood. I saw a dead spider in a web. I saw the reality of life lived at the top. When you fall all the way to the dust. Not now, I gasped. Please, not yet. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of leaving the clock unfinished. I was afraid of Sarah never knowing that I tried. The thought of her standing at the altar, looking at the empty seat where her father should be, was more painful than the pressure in my chest. I saw the silver Italian car through the open door of the shed. The driver was still there, waiting to take me to the jet. He didn't see me. He was looking at his own phone, probably checking the stock market. I tried to crawl toward the door. Every inch felt like climbing a mountain. My fingernails dug into the wood. The smell of stale oil and cold dirt was overwhelming. I reached the doorway and tried to wave my hand, but my strength vanished. The driver started the engine. Virum. The expensive exhaust filled the air for a moment, and then he drove away. He thought I had changed my mind. He thought I was just being a difficult billionaire. I was alone. The rain started to fall harder now. Drum, drum, drum. It splashed against my face, cold and biting. I lay there in the mud and the wood shavings, watching the tail lights of the car disappear into the gray mist. I felt my heart slow down. My mind began to drift. I saw Sarah as a little girl. I saw her crying because I missed her 5th birthday. I saw her graduation, where I spent the whole ceremony talking on my cell phone. Every memory was a debt I hadn't paid. I'm sorry, I whispered into the dirt. The darkness started to close in from the edges of my eyes. It was a peaceful darkness. No phones, no meetings, no deals, just the cold rain and the smell of the earth. I thought, so this is how it ends. The richest man in the world, dying in a shed with nothing but a broken clock for company. But then a sound cut to the fog in my brain. Click. It was a small metallic sound from inside the shed. A drop of water from the leaky roof had fallen onto the pendulum I had cleaned. The pendulum swung just a fraction of an inch. Tick, The sound was tiny, but it hit me like an electric shock. The clock was waiting. My father's ghost was waiting. I forced my lungs to take a sip of air. I pushed my body upward, my muscles screaming in protest. I didn't get up to call for help. I didn't get up to find a doctor. I dragged myself back to the workbench. I grabbed a bottle of water and drank it until I choked. My chest still hurt, a dull ache that warned me I was on the edge, but I didn't care. I sat back in the chair and picked up the tweezers. My hands were no longer shaking from greed or fear. They were shaking from sheer exhaustion. I looked at the clock. I had 1 day left. I didn't need a hospital. I didn't need a billionaire's life. I needed to hear that clock heartbeat again, even if it was the last thing I ever heard. Chapter 7. The Burden of Love. The clock stood tall in the center of the shed, its heartbeat. Tick, tock, filling the room. But outside, the world was moving faster than I could walk. I was a man with a masterpiece and no way to move it. I walked to the edge of the road, the heavy scent of pine and wet asphalt filling the air. I looked like a drifter. My father's flannel shirt was torn at the shoulder, and my hands were stained a deep, permanent black from the clock's oil. I stood by the highway for an hour. Every time a car passed, I felt the sting of my new reality. A year ago, I would have been in the back of a limousine. Now, I was just a gray-haired man holding a cardboard sign that said, Oak Creek. Finally, a rusted blue pickup truck slowed down. It groaned as it stopped, smelling of diesel and old hay. The driver was a young man, maybe 25, with a baseball cap pulled low. I can't give you money, I said before he could speak. But I have to get this to a wedding. The young man looked at the massive oak clock standing in the dirt behind me. He whistled. You built that? My father started it. I whispered. I finished it. It's all I have left. The boy nodded. My name's Caleb. Hop in. We'll have to be careful. She's a heavy lady. We lifted the clock into the bed of the truck. I wrapped in the old blankets I had slept on. As we drove, the wind whipped through the cab. Caleb talked about his own life, how he worked 2 jobs to buy a ring for his girlfriend. He was poor by my old standards, but as he spoke about his dreams, I realized he was richer than any CEO I knew. He had a destination. He had someone waiting for him. We reached Oak Creek Garden just as the sun was hitting the peak of the sky. The parking lot was full of shiny, expensive cars. I saw my own company's directors standing near the entrance, looking at their watches, wearing suits that cost more than Caleb's truck. I didn't go to the front. I asked Caleb to drive to the back, near the white tent where the music was playing. The sound of a violin floated on the breeze. It was a song I remembered Sarah humming when she was 6. My chest tightened, not with the pain of a heart attack, but with the crushing weight of a father's guilt. I thanked Caleb and gave him my $50,000 watch, the one I had left on the workbench. He tried to refuse, but I pressed it into his hand. This only tells you the time. I told him, don't let it tell you how to live. I waited until the minister said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The applause broke out. I took a deep breath and began to push. I had found an old wooden trolley in the garden shed. The clock was heavy, and the wheels sank into the soft grass. Crunch, crunch. My muscles burned. My heart hammered against my ribs, begging me to stop. I pushed the clock to the opening of the tent. The music stopped. The laughter died away. 300 people in silk and lace turned to look at the man in the dirty flannel shirt pushing a giant wooden box. I saw Marcus, my assistant, drop his glass of champagne. I saw Julian turn pale, but I only saw one person. Sarah stood at the end of the aisle. She was beautiful in white, like a cloud. Her face turned from confusion to shock, and then to something that looked like anger. What are you doing here, Thomas? She asked. Her voice was cold, but I could hear it trembling. I told you, I don't want your money. I don't want a house. I don't want a car. I stopped the clock in front of her. I was gasping for air, covered in sweat and dust. I looked like a madman, but I felt like a king. I know, I said. I reached out and opened the glass-doored clock. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small brass key, the final piece. I wound the clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound was so clear, so steady, that the entire tent fell into a trance. I didn't bring money, Sarah, I said, my voice breaking. I brought you the seconds I stole from you. I brought you the hours I spent working while you were growing up. I fixed this with my own hands. Every tick is an I'm sorry. Every tock is an I love you. I stepped back. I stood there, empty-handed, with nothing but the dirt under my fingernails and the truth in my eyes. The silence lasted forever. Then Sarah looked at the clock. She saw the small hand-carved initials at the bottom, SM and TM. She looked at my bleeding hands. She looked at my father's shirt. She didn't look at the billionaires in the front row. She ran. She didn't run away. She ran toward me. When she hit my chest, the air left my lungs. But for the first time in 56 years, I could finally breathe. Chapter 8. The Richest Man. The wedding continued, but the air had changed. The expensive champagne and the $1,000 flowers seemed to fade into the background. People didn't talk about the stock market or the latest mergers. They stood in a circle around a wooden clock, listening to its steady heartbeat. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I didn't stay for the party. I didn't sit at the father of the bride table. I didn't need the spotlight. After Sarah let go of me, she whispered, "Thank you, Dad. This is the first thing you've ever given me that feels real." Those 10 words were worth more than my entire investment portfolio. I walked away from the tent while the sun was beginning to set, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of purple and gold. I didn't take a limo. I didn't call a jet. I walked to the edge of the garden and sat on a stone bench, watching the shadows grow long. Julian found me there. He was holding 2 plastic cups of water. He sat down next to me, his expensive tuxedo looking out of place in the grass. "The Henderson deal is gone, Thomas," he said quietly. "The board removed you as CEO an hour ago. They say you've had a mental breakdown. You're broke or close to it. The lawyers are going to take most of what's left." I took a sip of the water. It tasted better than the $3,000 scotch. "How do you feel?" Julian asked, looking at me like I was a stranger. I looked at my hands. The black oil was still under my nails. The cut on my thumb was starting to heal. I felt a light breeze on my face, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I wasn't thinking about yesterday. I was just there. "I feel like I just woke up from a 30-year nap." "Julian," I said, "I'm not the CEO anymore. I'm just a man who knows how to fix clocks." 6 months later, I moved back into my father's old house. I sold the penthouse. I sold the cars. I kept the tools. I opened a small shop in the front of the house. There is no sign made of neon or glass, just a wooden board that says, "Miller and Daughter, we fix what time broke." Every Saturday, Sarah comes over. She doesn't come for money. She comes to sit in the sawdust, drink coffee, and tell me about her life. Sometimes we work on a clock together. Sometimes we just sit in silence and listen to the ticking. I don't have a private jet anymore. I have a bicycle. I don't have a chef. I have a vegetable garden that smells like fresh rain and tomatoes. My chest still aches sometimes, a small reminder that my time is limited, but the fear is gone. People often ask me if I regret crashing my life. They look at my old flannel shirt and my small house, and they feel sorry for me. They think I lost everything. I just smile and look at the clock on the wall. I used to spend my life counting millions. Now I count seconds. And I realize that a man who is 1 hour at peace with the people he loves is wealthier than a man who owns the world but sleeps in a silent tower. My name is Thomas Miller. I am a clockmaker. And I am, finally, the richest man I have ever known. To you, listening to this, look at your hands. Are they holding on to gold? Or are they holding on to a hand that loves you? Don't wait for a wedding to come home. Don't wait for a heart attack to start living. Time is not money. Time is life. Use it before the ticking stops.